An undercover owner gets humiliated at his own car dealership. Next day, he did something that will shock you. The morning air was crisp, but Max Reynolds barely noticed as he adjusted the faded cap on his head and glanced at his reflection in the streaked window of his beat-up sedan. Dressed in old jeans, a hoodie, and scuffed sneakers, he looked nothing like the multimillionaire owner of Autotech Elite Motors. That was the point. He wasn't there as Max Reynolds, the man who built a dealership empire from scratch. Today he was just Max, an average customer. The dealership loomed ahead, its glass facade gleaming under the early sun. Inside, the staff bustled, their polished shoes clicking on the tile floors as they laughed and chatted with one another. Max pushed the door open and stepped inside. A sleekly dressed receptionist behind a curved counter looked up, her smile faltering as she took him in. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice laced with disinterest. "Yes, I'm looking for a mid-range sedan," Max said casually. "Something reliable, maybe pre-owned. I'm on a bit of a budget." Her brow arched. "Pre-owned?" she repeated, her tone dipping into condescension. "Sure, let me see if someone's available to help you." She barely glanced over her shoulder as she called out, "Carl, customer." Carl, a tall man in a tailored suit, strolled over, holding a coffee cup. His eyes scanned Max from head to toe, and a flicker of disdain crossed his face. "Pre-owned, huh?" Carl said, smirking. "Well, you've got a lot of options. Let's see if we have something that fits your, budget." Max followed Carl to a section of the showroom where the older, less flashy cars were displayed. Carl walked ahead, barely bothering to explain the features of the cars they passed. "This one here is a solid option," Carl said, gesturing toward a sedan with a few dents on the fender. "Affordable, gets the job done. Probably the kind of thing you're looking for, right?" Max frowned. "I was hoping for something with a warranty. Maybe fewer miles?" Carl's smirk grew. "With your budget? Let me guess, you're financing right? Might want to adjust your expectations." Max felt a prickle of irritation. He kept his tone even. "I'd still like to know about the warranty options." Carl took a slow sip of his coffee and chuckled under his breath. "Tell you what, buddy, when you've got a little more cash to spend, come back, and I'll show you something nicer." Max blinked, his jaw tightening. "I'll think about it," he said tersely, stepping away. Frustrated, Max wandered further into the dealership. Other salespeople avoided eye contact or quickly redirected their attention to better-dressed customers. It was like he was invisible unless they needed a quick laugh. As he passed a display of luxury SUVs, he overheard a snippet of conversation between Carl and another salesman. "Guy in the hoodie? Bet he doesn't even have a credit score," Carl said, snickering. "Maybe he's here to buy floor mats," the other joked, their laughter grating in Max's ears. Max clenched his fists, a wave of anger rising in his chest. This wasn't just bad customer service, it was outright disrespect. He moved toward the quieter part of the dealership, where the janitorial closet stood. There, an older man in a blue uniform was tinkering with a small cart full of cleaning supplies. The name tag on his chest read Walter. "Careful there," Walter said with a smile as Max approached. "Just cleaned this spot." "Thanks," Max replied, trying to sound casual. "You seem busy." "Always am," Walter said, his voice warm. "But I like it. A clean floor, an organized space. It's the small things that keep a place running." As they talked, Max noticed something odd. Behind Walter's mock cart, hidden discreetly, was a service manual for a high-end sports car. "You a fan of cars?" Max asked, nodding toward the manual. Walter hesitated and shrugged. "You could say that. Used to be a mechanic, back when I was younger." Max raised an eyebrow. "What made you stop?" Walter gave a faint smile, tinged with sadness. "Life happens. Business went under, bills piled up. A man does what he has to do to get by." Max studied him for a moment, intrigued. "You still keep up with it? Fixing cars, I mean?" "Now and then," Walter admitted. "A lot of these newer models are over-engineered, but once you understand the basics, they're not so different. Like that SUV over there, the X4 Hybrid. Most people don't realize it has a factory issue with its fuel injector system. Easy fix, but it can cause headaches if you don't catch it early." Max blinked. He hadn't heard a single salesperson mention that issue all day. "How do you know that?" Walter shrugged again, this time with a touch of pride. "I read a lot. Manuals, forums, you name it. Figured if I couldn't work on cars anymore, I'd at least stay informed." Before Max could ask more, Carl's voice rang out. "Walter, quit slacking off and get back to work." Walter sighed. "Duty calls," he said with a small smile. As Walter walked away, Max's mind raced. The janitor clearly knew more about cars than most of the staff in the dealership, and yet he was being treated like an afterthought. Max lingered, pretending to browse cars, but really he was watching Walter. The janitor's knowledge wasn't just impressive, it was extraordinary. Over the next hour, Max saw him quietly helping confused customers, offering advice that was more practical and insightful than anything the sales team had provided. It wasn't long before Max had his decision. Tomorrow, Walter's hidden talents and the toxic culture of his dealership would face the light. The next morning, Max Reynolds pulled into the dealership parking lot, but this time he wasn't blending in. Gone were the faded hoodie and beat-up sneakers. Dressed in a tailored suit and stepping out of a sleek black sports car, a model from his own inventory, Max exuded the authority and confidence of the man who owned it all. Inside, the staff were already at work. The showroom buzzed with activity, but the moment Max stepped through the door, the energy shifted. A few employees paused mid-conversation, their eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Reynolds," the receptionist exclaimed, standing up so quickly she nearly knocked over her coffee. Max gave her a polite smile, but his gaze was sharp. "Good morning. Can you call the team to the showroom floor? I need to speak with everyone." Her face paled as she nodded and reached for the phone. Max's anonymity the previous day had been deliberate. Though he rarely visited this particular dealership, he had sent a memo weeks ago stating he'd be observing branches anonymously as part of a new quality control initiative. Staff had been warned that inspectors or secret shoppers could pose as customers at any time. Clearly, they hadn't taken the warning seriously, or they didn't think it applied to them. Within minutes, the entire team had assembled near the center of the showroom, their expressions ranging from confused to nervous. Carl stood at the front, looking smug as ever, but there was a hint of unease in his posture. "Good morning, sir. What's going on?" Carl asked, trying to maintain his usual bravado. Max stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "I wanted to thank you all for the hospitality you showed me yesterday." A murmur spread through the group. Carl frowned. "Yesterday?" Carl echoed, his brow furrowing. "I don't remember seeing you here, sir." Max's lips curved into a tight smile. "That's because I wasn't dressed like this. Yesterday I was just a regular customer, looking for a car and observing how things operate around here." The realization hit like a thunderclap. A ripple of shock swept through the staff as they processed his words. Carl's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. "That was you, Mr. Reynolds?" the receptionist stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's right," Max said, his gaze sweeping over the group. "And what I saw yesterday was disappointing, to say the least." Before anyone could respond, Max turned his attention to the back of the room, where Walter stood, still clutching his mop. "Walter," Max called, his voice warm, "would you mind stepping forward?" Walter hesitated, clearly surprised, but slowly set his mop aside and approached the front. His humble demeanor was unchanged, though there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "This man," Max said, addressing the group, "showed more knowledge, kindness, and professionalism in a single day than some of you have shown in years." Walter looked startled, his weathered hands clenching nervously. "I learned something interesting about you yesterday," Max continued, focusing on Walter. "You used to be a mechanic, didn't you?" Walter nodded slowly. "That's right. But it's been a while." Max smiled. "A while, maybe, but your knowledge hasn't faded. You noticed issues with the X4 hybrid that even our trained staff failed to mention. And your willingness to help customers without expecting anything in return is exactly the kind of attitude this dealership was built on." The staff shifted uncomfortably, Carl in particular looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Max turned his gaze to Carl, his expression hardening. "And then there's you. Yesterday you insulted a customer for asking about financing. You mocked me to your colleagues. And when Walter stepped in to help where you failed, you humiliated him publicly." Carl stammered, his bravado crumbling. "I didn't know it was you. I thought." "That's the problem," Max interrupted, his tone cold. "You thought because I didn't look wealthy, I wasn't worth your time. How many other customers have you treated the same way?" Carl opened his mouth to protest, but fell silent under Max's icy stare. Max scanned the rest of the staff, and it wasn't just him. "I saw plenty of you ignoring customers, prioritizing appearances over service, and doing the bare minimum. This isn't the dealership I built, and it ends today." Max turned back to Walter, his tone softening. "Walter, you've been here for years, haven't you?" "Almost 5, Walter replied hesitantly. "And in those 5 years, has anyone ever acknowledged your knowledge of cars, your dedication to helping people?" Walter hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir. I just figured it wasn't my place." "Well, I think it is your place," Max said firmly. "Starting today, you're not the janitor anymore. You're the lead consultant for pre-owned vehicles." Gasps rippled through the room. Walter's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to speak, but Max held up a hand. "You've already been doing the job," Max continued with a smile. "You just hadn't been given the title or the pay to match it. I've seen what you're capable of, and I know you'll excel." Walter's hands trembled slightly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," Max said. Walter nodded, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "I accept." As the staff murmured amongst themselves, Max raised his hand for silence. "Now, as for the rest of you," he said, his tone turning serious again, "things are going to change around here. Effective immediately, we're implementing a new training program focused on empathy, inclusivity, and product knowledge." He let his gaze linger on Carl. "Those who can't meet the new standards will be let go." Carl's face turned red as he sputtered. "But sir, I've been one of the top salesmen for years." Max's voice was calm but firm. "Being good at sales doesn't excuse bad behavior. I've already hired mystery shoppers to test each of you in the coming weeks. Your actions will determine your future here." The room fell silent, the weight of Max's words sinking in. This dealership was meant to be a place where everyone, regardless of their budget, felt welcome and valued. Max concluded, "If you can't get behind that, you don't belong here." The following day, Walter stepped into the dealership for his first official day as a pre-owned vehicle consultant. He wore a simple but neatly pressed shirt and tie that Max had arranged for him to pick up. Gone were his janitorial tools and uniform. Instead, he carried a clipboard, his posture a mix of excitement and nerves. "Walter." Max greeted warmly as he approached. "Ready for your first day?" Walter nodded, though his hands fidgeted with the clipboard. "I hope I can live up to your expectations, sir." "You already have," Max replied with a reassuring smile. "Just do what you've always done, help the customers. You've got this." Walter's first customer was a middle-aged man named Greg who was looking for an affordable family car. Greg looked overwhelmed as he glanced at the rows of vehicles. Walter approached him with a smile. "Hi there, need a hand finding the right car?" Greg hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I've got 3 kids, so I need something spacious, reliable, and affordable." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "I've got just the thing in mind. Let me show you a pre-owned SUV that's got great safety features and low mileage." Walter guided Greg to a car that perfectly fit his needs, explaining its features in detail. As they talked, Greg visibly relaxed, his initial uncertainty replaced by appreciation for Walter's straightforward and genuine approach. But as Walter finished his pitch, Carl appeared, his smirk firmly back in place. "Walter," he said loudly, "you sure you're not in over your head? Customers can smell an experience from a mile away." Greg frowned, looking uncomfortable. Walter, to his credit, didn't flinch. "I'm just doing my best to help," Walter replied calmly. "Well, let me step in," Carl said, stepping between them. "After all, sales is my department." Max, watching from across the room, stepped forward before things could escalate. "Carl," he said firmly, his tone cutting through the tension, "Walter is more than capable of handling this." Carl's jaw tightened, but he backed away with a forced grin. "Of course, sir, just trying to help." Greg smiled at Walter. "You've been great. Let's talk about financing." Walter's face lit up with a mixture of relief and pride as he escorted Greg to the office, leaving Carl fuming in the background. Later that afternoon, Walter noticed something odd. As he prepared to show a young couple another pre-owned vehicle, he found the car's keys missing from the rack. He double-checked the inventory system, which showed that the car should have been available. Confused, Walter searched the lot until he found the car parked in the far corner, away from the showroom. The keys had been left on the driver's seat, a detail that felt deliberate. Max, who had been observing quietly, noticed Walter's hesitation and walked over. "Everything okay?" Walter hesitated before explaining what he found. Max frowned. "This isn't a mistake," Max said quietly. "Someone's trying to sabotage you." Walter's face fell. "Why would anyone do that?" "I'm just trying to help." "Because change makes people uncomfortable," Max said. "But don't worry, we'll deal with this." Max immediately called a meeting, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. "I don't know who's responsible," he said, looking pointedly at Carl and a few other staff members. "But if I see even a hint of sabotage or unprofessional behavior again, there will be consequences." The room fell silent, the tension thick. As the day wound down, Walter noticed a man lingering near the lot, dressed in a worn leather jacket and jeans. The man wasn't a customer. He wasn't browsing cars or talking to staff. Instead, he seemed to be watching Walter. Walter's brow furrowed as he approached the man cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man looked startled but quickly recovered. "No, I'm just looking around." Something about the man's demeanor felt off, but before Walter could press further, the man walked away, disappearing down the street. When Walter told Max about the encounter, Max's expression darkened. Did he say anything else? No, Walter replied, but it felt strange, like he wasn't here for the cars. Max's gut told him this wasn't a coincidence. Over the years, he dealt with competitors and disgruntled former employees trying to disrupt his business. Something about this felt personal. "Keep an eye out," Max said, his tone serious. "If you see him again, let me know immediately." As Walter prepared to leave for the day, Max called him into his office. "You did great today," Max said. "That family SUV sale was one of the smoothest I've seen in months." Walter smiled, but there was a hint of unease in his eyes. "I appreciate that, sir. But are you sure I'm the right person for this job? Not everyone seems happy about it." Max leaned forward, his expression sincere. "Walter, the best people for the job are often the ones who don't think they're ready. You care about the customers and you know these cars inside and out. That's more than I can say for some of the people here." Walter nodded slowly, the weight of Max's words sinking in. "And one more thing," Max added. "If someone's trying to sabotage you, it's because they see you as a threat. That's their problem, not yours." Walter left the office with a renewed sense of purpose, but the lingering image of the man in the leather jacket stayed with him. The next morning, Walter arrived at the dealership determined to push past the doubts and challenges of the previous day. But as he walked through the lot, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered after the encounter with the man in the leather jacket. Something about it felt unresolved. Inside, the showroom was already bustling. Walter was quickly approached by a young woman named Jessica, who nervously explained that she needed a car within her limited budget to commute to her new job. Walter's kind demeanor quickly put her at ease, and he began walking her through options. However, as Walter prepared to show Jessica a pre-owned sedan that fit her needs, Carl approached, wearing his signature smirk. Walter, still playing salesman. Carl sneered, loud enough for others to hear. "Let me take over before you scare her off." Jessica frowned, her discomfort evident. Walter's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Max appeared, his voice calm but firm. "Carl, I need to see you in my office. Now." Carl's smirk faltered, but he followed Max. In Max's office, Carl leaned casually against the doorframe, trying to feign confidence. "What's this about, Mr. Reynolds? I was just stepping in to help a customer." Max's expression was stone cold. "Carl, this isn't about that one customer. It's about your attitude, your behavior, and your inability to work as part of a team." Carl scoffed. "With all due respect, I've been your top salesman for years. I've brought in more revenue than anyone else here. You can't seriously be considering letting me go." Max folded his arms, his gaze unwavering. "Sales figures don't excuse disrespect, sabotage, and a toxic attitude. Yesterday, I gave you a clear warning. Today, you ignored it." Carl's bravado cracked. I didn't mean anything by it. He's not cut out for this." "That's not for you to decide," Max snapped, his voice sharp. "Walter has proven himself more capable than you in many ways, and he's done it without belittling others or putting his ego first." Carl shifted uncomfortably. "You need me. No one else can bring in the numbers I do." Max's voice was calm but firm. "I'd rather lose sales than keep someone who poisons the culture of this dealership." "Carl, you're fired. Pack up your things and leave immediately." Carl's face turned red with anger and disbelief. "You'll regret this," he spat before storming out. Max watched him go, unshaken. The dealership and its people deserved better. As Max returned to the showroom, he noticed Walter talking with the man in the leather jacket who had visited the day before. Curious, Max approached them, catching the tail end of their conversation. "I'm not here to cause trouble," the man said, his tone genuine. "I just needed to say my piece." "Say what?" Max asked, stepping forward. The man, startled, looked at Max before glancing back at Walter. "This is Frank," Walter explained. "We used to run shops near each other years ago." Max's brows furrowed. "And what brings you here now, Frank?" Frank sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Regret. I sabotaged Walter's shop years ago, spread rumors, undercut his prices, and drove away his customers. I've lived with that guilt ever since." Walter remained quiet, his face unreadable. Frank continued, "I heard you were working here, Walter, and I wanted to apologize. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I needed you to know I'm sorry." Walter looked at Frank for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "You're right. You can't undo what you did. But I've learned to move forward. I forgive you, but don't expect me to forget." Frank's relief was evident as he extended a hand. Walter hesitated, but eventually shook it. Max watched the exchange, impressed by Walter's quiet strength. At the end of the day, Max called another meeting with the staff. This time, Walter stood beside him, no longer the janitor in the background, but a respected part of the team. "I want everyone here to take a good look at Walter," Max said, his voice steady. "He represents what this dealership should stand for: knowledge, hard work, and genuine care for our customers." The staff murmured amongst themselves, some looking inspired, while others glanced nervously, no doubt shaken by Carl's sudden departure. From now on, Max continued, "Walter will not only be our lead consultant for pre-owned vehicles, but also a mentor for anyone who wants to improve their skills. If you're willing to learn, he's willing to teach." Walter shifted uncomfortably under the attention, but Max placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "And one more thing," Max added, "the toxic behavior that's been allowed to fester here is over." Carl's departure is a reminder that no one is above treating their coworkers and customers with respect. After the meeting, Max pulled Walter aside. "There's one more thing I'd like to discuss," he said. Walter frowned. "What's that?" "I want to help you rebuild what you lost," Max said simply. "Not just a position here, but your reputation and maybe even your own business again someday." Walter's eyes widened. "You do that for me?" Max nodded. "You've earned it. This dealership can only benefit from someone like you leading by example." Walter's voice caught as he replied, "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to repay you." Max smiled. "Just keep being yourself. That's more than enough." As Walter left for the evening, his steps were lighter than they had been in years. The dealership felt different now, filled with possibility, not just for him, but for everyone who walked through its doors.